This vehicle has unwanted engine noise. We're going to talk about that and several other top problems on this 4th generation Hyundai Accent. Let's get into it. Looks like we're off to a good start, but the show must go on. More on this problem later. I can do it. Whew. Now for our first problem, we're going to talk about issue with sound coming from your stereo speakers inside of the vehicle. This is where we're going to spend most of our time whenever we're around the vehicle, inside of it, and typically we have the radio on. Now if you're driving and you can flip through the channels and adjust the volume, but no sound comes out of the speakers, this is a common issue on these particular vehicles, generally not necessarily the hybrid ones, but even the ones that have navigation or even like a higher end stereo inside of them. It comes down to a reprogramming issue. Now for this, there really isn't any part replacements you have to worry about. The one thing that you would want to do is safely make your way under the hood. What we're going to do here is we're actually going to disconnect the negative and the positive terminal from the battery. We can attach our wire from one wire over to the other. Once we have that on there, you want to leave it for approximately 15 minutes. That's going to drain the capacitors. After that, we're going to carefully reconnect everything. We'll start with the positive, end with the negative, and then you can go ahead and try that stereo. It should work perfectly. Let's go ahead and test it. Key power, volume. All right, so we definitely have volume coming out of the speakers at this point. The next thing you want to do is go ahead and reset your presets to exactly where you want them. Now, while looking under the hood, the next thing we're going to talk about is the canister purge valve. If you were driving in your vehicle and you found that you had a check engine light that popped up on the dash, you pull the code and it says P0441, it's going to tell you you're having an issue with the canister purge valve. On this particular vehicle, it's going to be located under the hood, and we're going to have to remove the engine cover for this. It's very simple. Now that we have that cover off of here, you can see that there's a whole bunch of things that were being protected by the cover, but the one thing that we're going to pay attention under here is the canister purge valve. That's located right along the top of the engine. So now you're wondering, what's the purpose of this purge valve? Inside the fuel system, it's going to build up vapor and pressure. A lot of that vapor is going to get built up inside of your charcoal canister, which is located under the rear of the vehicle, and then there's evap lines that are going to make its way all the way from there up to this point. This is a valve that's either going to open or close, allowing that vapor to make its way into the engine, which will eventually get burnt up into the combustion chamber. Now, how does this fail and how do you even tell? Well, being a valve, it should be able to open and close. If the vehicle is off with no key power, it should be closed at all times. If the vehicle is on, running at normal operating temperature, the vehicle's computer is going to say whether or not it should be open. And this can actually pulsate on and off, depending on what the computer says. If the valve was stuck either open or closed, it can cause this check engine light, so it's something that you want to diagnose. Now, a free and easy way to tell if this valve is stuck in the open position is to go ahead and disconnect the electrical connector. We'd want to make our way over to the hose that leads down to the vapor canister, which is the one that leads off towards the driver's side, and then we're going to start up the vehicle and let it run. While it's running, we want to carefully touch on the area on the valve here where the hose connects onto. If you can feel vacuum there, that tells you that the valve is stuck in the open position and it has to be replaced. If you need it, we've got it at 1aauto.com. Moving along to our next engine-related issue, we're going to talk about an area on your engine wiring harness that can get rubbed through and cause runnability issues. If you are looking at your brake master cylinder and make your way all the way down in this area, you're going to find a large wiring harness. And if you were to follow that wiring harness, you'll find that it leads all the way up along the top of the engine to each of your ignition coils. The wiring harness is connected to a bracket which is attached to your transmission. The wiring harness is attached to the bracket with a wire tie, which gets dry rotted and brittle and breaks over time. It's going to cause an issue where the bracket actually wears through the wiring harness outer sheathing, and it could get to a point where it's grounding out against that bracket. When that happens, you can blow a 15 amp fuse, which is located inside the passenger compartment. That's for the ignition coils. Other than that, you might find that you have a runnability issue, such as a misfire or something the like. That'll lead you to wanting to replace the ignition coils. But the problem with that is you replace the ignition coils and you don't fix this issue, it's going to reoccur on you. And that can cause premature damage to even your brand new ignition coils. When you have this issue, you always want to thoroughly diagnose, and that's the first place I would look, down at that wiring harness. If I did find it had an issue, I'm going to replace the ignition coils and of course inspect the spark plugs at the same time. If that happens, you go to 1aauto.com, you order the spark plugs and the ignition coils at the same time as a kit. Now, while we still have the engine cover off, we're going to move along to talking about something that can cause that engine noise that you heard at the very beginning of this video. Along the top of the valve cover over towards the passenger side, you're going to have a VVT solenoid. This is obviously located underneath where that plastic cover would be. Now on this VVT solenoid, it's going to have oil that makes its way through it. There has to be screens on the VVT solenoid, and what can typically happen if you aren't keeping up on your maintenance as you should, you start getting a little bit dirty oil or even low oil. It's not getting the pressure going through that solenoid that it should, and it can't function the timing aspect of the VVT solenoid and actuator the way that it should. When that happens, you're going to find that you have runnability issues such as a misfire, stalling conditions, or even just poor acceleration or fuel economy. On most vehicles, you're going to go about 3,000 to 5,000 miles on an oil change, but it's always important to pull over every once in a while on a flat level surface with your engine off and check your engine oil condition and level. If it looks like it's getting dirty, go ahead and replace it. If it's just a little low but clean, go ahead and top it off up to that maximum line. And of course, you do want to make sure you keep up on the maintenance as necessary. If you need the VVT solenoid, we got them. All right. That's everything as far as under the hood's concerned. Let's make our way safely under the rear of the vehicle. Now we're under the rear of the vehicle and we're looking for the rear suspension. This is a common issue on these particular vehicles, and it has to do with the rear shock. If while under the vehicle you can see your rear shock is leaking oil like this right here, it commonly means that the gas that's inside is also gone as well. At that point, this shock is really not doing very much here. When you're driving down the road, you might find when you hit bumps, you get a little bit of a clunking noise coming from the back. If you were to feel along your tires, you might also feel as though they're chopped or even cupping in some way. When your tires are chopped or even cupped, they're going to cause an odd howling noise when you're driving down the road. That could be common on these particular vehicles if you're having an issue with the rear shocks. When you do these, you do them as a pair and you order them from us. Now we can talk about this door handle issue. I've seen this before on several different types of vehicles. On this particular vehicle, it's a two-piece door handle. You're going to have this aspect where you can take hold of it, but then there should be a secondary piece. The secondary piece is much smaller. It's going to have a small port for that lock cylinder, but it also has one area on it that has a mounting bolt. That's going to come through from the inside of the door, hold onto that secondary piece, and it's going to prevent this from coming out of the door. It's common for that secondary piece to break, especially around where the plastic is that holds the nutskirt in place. Once that comes off, there's nothing holding the door handle on. If you need it, order it from us.